You find a critical bug just one day before release. What will you do?
First, I would reproduce the issue and gather all the details, such as steps to reproduce, screenshots, logs, and its business impact. Then, I would immediately report the defect to the developer and communicate it to the test lead and project manager. If the defect affects critical functionalities like login, payment, or causes data loss, I would recommend delaying the release until the issue is fixed and retested. The final decision would be based on risk assessment and business impact.
A developer says this bug is not reproducible. What will you do?
I would verify the defect again and collect complete evidence, including test data, screenshots, videos, browser details, and environment information. I would discuss the issue with the developer and demonstrate the defect if necessary. If the issue occurs intermittently, I would try different scenarios and gather more information to help identify the root cause. The objective is to collaborate and resolve the issue.
Requirements are unclear, but testing needs to start. What will you do?
I would discuss the requirements with the business analyst, product owner, or client to get clarification. Meanwhile, I would prepare high-level test scenarios based on the available information and document my assumptions. Once the requirements become clear, I would update the test cases accordingly. Asking questions early helps avoid defects and rework later.
You have very little time and many test cases to execute. How will you manage?
I would prioritize testing based on business impact and risk. Critical functionalities such as login, payment, registration, and core business workflows would be tested first. Then I would focus on medium priority and low priority features. I would also discuss priorities with stakeholders to ensure maximum test coverage within the available time.
A developer says the application is working on their machine but not on yours. What will you do?
I would compare both environments, including browser version, operating system, application version, database configuration, and test data. Many issues occur because of environmental differences. I would collect evidence and work with the developer to identify the root cause.
The client requests a last-minute requirement change. How will you handle it?
I would first understand the requirement change and analyze its impact on existing functionality. Then, I would update test scenarios and test cases, identify affected modules, and perform regression testing. I would also communicate the additional testing effort and risks to the project team.
You are asked to test a feature with no documentation. How will you proceed?
I would first understand the application by exploring it and discussing it with developers, business analysts, or experienced team members. Then, I would identify possible user scenarios, prepare test cases, and start exploratory testing to ensure proper coverage.
A defect is fixed by the developer. What will you do next?
I would perform retesting to verify that the defect has been fixed successfully. After that, I would perform regression testing on related functionalities to ensure the fix has not introduced any new defects.
A defect occurs intermittently. How will you handle it?
I would try different test data, browsers, devices, and environments to identify patterns. I would capture screenshots, logs, and timestamps whenever the issue occurs and provide detailed information to the developer for investigation.
During testing, the application crashes. What will you do?
I would reproduce the issue and determine whether it happens consistently. Then, I would collect logs, screenshots, and steps to reproduce. Since application crashes significantly impact business operations, I would report it as a high-severity defect and immediately inform the project stakeholders.
A customer-reported issue cannot be reproduced in the test environment. What will you do?
I would collect detailed information from the customer, including browser details, operating system, screenshots, user actions, and timestamps. I would try to replicate the production environment as closely as possible and work with developers and support teams to identify the root cause.
You have completed testing, but a new build is received at the last moment. What will you do?
I would first understand what changes are included in the new build. Then, I would perform smoke testing to ensure the build is stable and conduct impact analysis. Depending on the changes, I would execute retesting and regression testing before giving final sign-off.
What will you do if developers disagree with the severity of a defect?
I would explain the business impact of the defect with supporting evidence and examples. Severity should be decided based on functionality impact and user experience rather than personal opinion. If there is still disagreement, I would involve the test lead or product owner for a final decision.
Suppose the login page is working, but users cannot log in. How will you test it?
I would verify scenarios such as valid credentials, invalid credentials, blank fields, password masking, account lockout, database connectivity, browser compatibility, and error messages. I would also check server logs and database records if required.
How would you test a calculator application?
I would test addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division operations. I would verify positive and negative numbers, decimal values, large numbers, division by zero, invalid inputs, and user interface functionality. I would also perform boundary value and error handling testing.
How would you test an e-commerce checkout process?
I would test product search and selection, add to cart functionality, quantity modification, price calculation, coupon application, address and shipping details, payment processing, order confirmation, email notifications, order cancellation, and refund scenarios. Since checkout directly affects revenue, I would give it the highest priority.
Suppose you have only 1 hour to test an application. What will you do?
I would focus on risk-based testing. First, I would execute smoke testing on critical functionalities such as login, navigation, search, transactions, and logout. Then, I would perform exploratory testing on major workflows. My goal would be to identify maximum critical defects in minimum time.
What will you do if the production environment is down after deployment?
I would immediately inform stakeholders and gather information regarding the issue. I would help identify whether it is related to deployment, configuration, database, or application changes. I would provide all testing observations and assist the team in reproducing the issue. Communication and quick collaboration are extremely important during production issues.
You discover a defect that was missed in previous testing cycles. What will you do?
I would report the defect immediately and analyze why it was missed. I would check whether test cases were incomplete, requirements changed, or the scenario was overlooked. I would update test cases and improve the testing process to prevent similar issues in future releases.
How do you decide whether testing is complete?
Testing is considered complete when all planned test cases have been executed. Critical and high-priority defects are fixed and verified. Regression testing is completed, exit criteria defined in the test plan are met, and stakeholders are informed about any known risks and agree on release readiness. Real interview closing statement: I do not assume software is completely bug-free. My responsibility as a tester is to reduce business risk by ensuring critical functionalities work correctly and providing stakeholders with sufficient information to make an informed release decision.